Hello and welcome everybody. Welcome back to the channel. We are only 81 subscribers away from 400, and that would mean 181 away from 500, which is what I'm hoping to achieve by the midterms. We could very well make it. If you consider subscribing, please do if you are new. Now, going straight into the video today, I'm going to be trying to predict more or less what we think the actual generic ballot will end up looking like for Republicans. What the actual result will be, not just based on polling averages, but what we're actually going to see at the end of the day, now being only about 8 days out from the election. So, first of all, we have normal RCP polls, we have past ones to look at, we have some other interesting data to look in here. But polling, as I've said, in the past many times, consistently underestimates Republicans more or less in midterm years, especially years that are supposed to favor Republicans. For some reason, they just consistently underestimate Republicans by such large margins. For example, before we look in this, 2014's generic congressional ballot, I've looked at this many times before. I've talked about it plenty of times. Republicans were only ahead by 2.4 in the RCP averages, okay? Despite that, they ended up with a 5.7 final result. That was what the actual result was. Now, there were some polls that were closer, more or less, to what the results were, but there was also a lot of polls that were off. Now, taking that into account, looking at the current overall polling for the 2022 congressional ballot, we see a 2.9 lead for Republicans. Now, there's one poll here that we may as well just toss out anyway. This really bad one by Morning Consult Politico. 2,005 registered voters. No, that's a bad poll. And D+5, like these two are massive outliers amongst the rest of all of these other polls that show the complete opposite. So you toss those out, the average probably goes up to about 4.1, I believe. So realistically, the polling averages have it at 4.1. Now, if they underestimated, similarly to how much they did in 2014, which is not guaranteed, I doubt it would be that bad, but we could be looking at potentially R+5, R+6, maybe. But we need to take some other stuff into account and see why this is the case and see if this really will be the result. And at the end of the day, I think Republicans end up getting over 51%. So these are underestimating. There's still a lot of undecided voters. And then Democrats, they'll probably get around 40. I'd say they'd probably get around 45. But again, I think Republicans are going to get about probably 50 to 50 something else. Now, something else to consider when we're looking at this. This was the generic congressional ballot trends amongst independents from the CBS YouGov, pretty much the worst pollsters out there. It had in October, okay? So October 14th, supposedly. This is YouGov, so what do you expect? And there was a high amount of undecideds when they did this poll, I believe. But Democrats held the independent vote in only 14-day time span, but they held the independent vote by 2 points, and now Republicans hold it by 16. Now, realistically, probably Republicans already had around a 10 to a 16 point lead amongst independents, and their polling at this time was just really bad because 14-day time span to go that much is just unrealistic. It's unlikely. But now looking a little closer here, we look at the rest of these generic congressional ballots. As you can see, New York Times, Siena, that Republicans are leading amongst independents. Republicans leading amongst independents again, and again. So this is something to consider. Independents, for the most part, often are the ones who decide electoral results. They decide what the ballot's going to look like, everything of that nature. And as of now, Republicans are leading in very, very, very wide numbers amongst independent voters, which is what you need if you want to win the elections, especially if you want to win more. Now, this is going to have, overall, if you don't know, but generic congressional ballot has to do more with the House, but it also generally, it kind of reflects on the national environment, what overall a lot of results could look like. but usually it applies more to the House. So this has an impact on how many seats the Republicans can gain in the House. I'll look at that a little bit later. But considering this, if Republicans are leading by this much amongst independents, that is very, very big. And that, to some extent, makes up for why Republicans are actually leading in the generic congressional ballot polling, other than these two garbage outlier polls. Again, Economist / YouGov, and then a Politico Morning Consult using 2005 registered voters. Now, these two, yes, they use registered voters as well. You could probably toss them, and the average would still be Republican about 4 points. And, like I said a little earlier, we saw this dip. We saw this dip starting in August, where Republicans pretty much lost the lead for a while into September, and everyone was freaking out, and Democrats were like, "Oh no, we got this back. This is good. We're going to get the House. We're going to hold the Senate because of this." And I said at the time, I said, "Don't freak out. No. At the end of the day, this trend is going to reverse and Republicans are going to gain again." Again, looking at the 2014 congressional ballot, we saw Democrats the entire time were leading. Other than tiny little stints here and there, they led up until like September, and then they lost the lead, and then even then the polls underestimated by about 3-something points. So we have to consider this. There's still about a week. Not much time, but it's about a week until the midterms. That gives a decent amount of time for Republicans to gain even a bit more ground, which is very possible. And another thing to consider with this isn't just, oh, well, this is just voting, you know? This is, to some extent, realistically, this is a referendum on Joe Biden. So we have to consider his popularity, because that's generally what happens most midterm years anyway. It's a lot of the time a referendum on the president. And in this case, Joe Biden, as you can see, is not doing well. He doesn't have a lot of support. He's not polling well. Trump had similar issues. I do think the overall approval for him was underestimated and his disapproval was overestimated, because polling generally tends to favor Democrats over Republicans fairly consistently. There have been cases where that's not 100% true, but most of the time we've seen that. So we have to consider this. This is just overall how popular Joe Biden is. And that, as a result, will reflect on how Democrats are going to be able to perform, which is not currently looking very good. We also have to consider comparably how popular Trump is. Currently, the favor between the two, Trump is actually leading. I don't have it, but Trump is currently leading in many polls over Biden. Not all, but he is leading. And even in this poll right here, we have the Hill Emerson poll. It has Biden only ahead by 7 in New York against Trump. That's something to consider. Yes, this isn't the 2024 election, but this still has an impact. And right now, Trump and the Republican Party, they're currently the ones that are looking to gain. Alternatively, people are already very fed up with Democrats, and especially with Joe Biden. So as a result, that will reflect on what the final congressional ballot will look like. Not only that, let's consider the polling and how we saw Virginia looking. The polling was somewhat close. It was a little close, but I don't think everyone expected Youngkin to win for most of the time, until much closer we saw, oh wait, Youngkin might actually win, and then he outperformed the polls just slightly. And that's in a Democrat state. So if we consider that, we have to consider all this data. When we look at this, these past polls as well, what the final result will actually look like. And if I'm being honest, I do think, with this currently being about 4, if you take this crap out and even these two, Republicans probably will win the generic ballot by about 6 points. About 6 points. That might be a stretch to some. Yeah, I can understand that. But it doesn't mean it's unlikely. In fact, I'd say it's actually more likely than anything. I don't think that Republicans can't get that. Like, at bare minimum, they get 4. They get 4 points on the congressional ballot. but they very well could get more than that. Quite a bit more, actually. So, as a result, if we do get a R+6 environment, which I think is very possible, being a complete 10-point reversal or so from the 2020 environment, as you can see, if we look here, it ended up being a D+3, okay? D+3 environment. That's what the environment ended up being. And polling here, overestimating Democrats in 2020 by quite a large margin. But D+3.1. So if it's a 6, that's almost a 10-point swing, which is huge. That is a massive, massive swing. And that has an impact on a lot, quite a few. Like, that has an impact on a lot of House races and even the Senate races, but especially House races. So here, this is my original 2022 House prediction that I did a while back. I'll put a link to the video somewhere up there in the cards if you want to watch it. And I still stand by this. It might, a couple seats might be shifted, like Nevada's first. Like, here, we can quickly change a few of these. But at the end of the day, I still stand by this House prediction. Because if we say we're getting, what, a 9-point swing, and Biden ended up winning this seat by 8.7, we swing that by 9 points, this flips in to a tilt Republican column. This becomes a lean. That's what's going to happen overall with most of these races. That's what we have to consider here. So Republicans pick up a very large amount, and at the end of the day, I think might be a little bit of a stretch, but I think R+6 is what we're going to get. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing, leaving a like on this video as well. Comment down below, let me know what you think. Tell me what you think the final congressional generic ballot will be. Leave the comment down below. Anyways, that's all for now.